All right. Cool. All right. Well, thanks. We'll say you, Chen, for joining Sam and I at the poorly timed SKO overlapping kickoff. Not a whole lot on the product update side today from me. First, this is a repeat of last time, but worth reminding again, we have 16.0 coming up. There are some breaking changes that are included with that release. I think first and foremost, there is a change to what we're going to do on schema enforcement. So we will be dropping support for any analyzer that outputs a schema below 15.0.0. This applies to GitLab as well as any partner or integrated homegrown third-party tools. So if you have customers that are potentially using something we may not be aware of, they should be getting warnings today about the schema. With 16, we will stop ingesting them. They will become errors. They will not produce findings. Sam, looks like you have a couple more deprecations.
Yep. So we've got some really big changes around license compliance coming. So we're going to be dropping support for license check. That should be replaced with license approval policies. And we're also dropping support for the license scanning CI job. And that will be replaced just by running the dependency scanning job in your pipeline. Will give you everything you need to get that license data. So, some big changes there. Please make your customers aware if they want to use our new license scanning capability early. They just need to make sure that they're not running the license scanning CI job. Otherwise, we'll default to that as the old method. But I definitely recommend that they take those jobs out of their pipeline as soon as they can, just because our new method tends to be, at least from all of our internal testing, it's provided far better results than the previous method. And so I would strongly recommend that they add those dependency scanning jobs if they don't have them already, and remove the license scanning jobs from their pipeline. And that's all I've got as far as major announcements anyway.
Awesome. Sam. One that is a fairly recent item. I don't think we've talked about this before. So I have been talking with Hannah Suter, who is on our authorization and authentication group. And her team is actually doing the work to help separate out a vulnerability management permission for custom permission. So we're going to start by limiting access to the vulnerability report. The way that custom roles are being approached right now from that group is they are going with an additive model. So you can't take an existing role and subtract a permission. You can clone a lower role and add to it. So it's not going to be a full way to restrict access, let's say from like the developer role, for instance, because you can't take it out, but you can do things like using the reporter base and adding vulnerability report access to it. I know that's something that comes up from time to time with customers, is they want an AppSec role that can do vulnerability triage and management, but that doesn't have access to the repositories. So that would allow that to happen. So that should be the first of hopefully many permissions that are going to start moving over from the security side. Any questions on that one, Chen?
Yeah, actually one question about that one, and about the previous items as well. If it's better routed to the auth team, just let me know. But just to be very explicit, there is not going to be a quote unquote out of the box role called AppSec. This AppSec role will be created by adding permissions to a role that currently does not have view vulnerability report. Is that an accurate statement?
From my understanding, yes. For now, the way that they're trying to increment forward is they're allowing you to clone an existing role, and then where work has been done like this to sort of carve out a feature into a standalone, I guess, assignable permission, you will be able to add into these lower roles. I think long-term, the vision is to go fully custom. I suppose you could do that like with a guest user, where you build up. But in terms of like an out of the box AppSec role, I don't know if they're ever going to go down that path fully. I think the idea may be more to head towards you can roll your own whichever way you like.
Okay, that's cool. I've had some conversations with the auth team about how far addition should go with the guest role. Obviously, there's a lot of considerations there. But I will say that this change is highly welcome, because one of the big asks from my customers who are security centric is, there's, for example, auditors that just want to look at the vuln report and don't need access to the rest of the information in a project. So that's awesome. Can I ask a cool question about the previous items?
Yeah, actually, I did want to say, so what you mentioned there about the auditors, there actually is an issue in the backlog to address that specific limitation. So I think that was something that was actually just overlooked during the development of some of the vulnerability management pieces, is the auditor should have access in a read-only view, from my understanding, to everything in GitLab. But you do have to sort of code into that role. And so that wasn't done. So that is actually, I would say, not only is it a separate issue, it's much likelier that that's going to happen quickly in terms of the role customization being able to facilitate that.
Okay, I see. So there's a separate user story out there, or ethic perhaps, for the auditor role. But what we have just discussed here is greater abilities beyond view only.
Yes.
For example, triaging. Okay, awesome.
Here, in fact,
Cool.
I'll link, that is the issue right there.
Got it. That's double great, because just more granularity is always appreciated, right? Since every org has their own take on, privilege, permission, and all of that as far as the vulns and who can see them. Let's see there. And yep, I see the link. So I'll give that a gander afterwards. One, just FYI, it's much appreciated for me personally, at least. I won't speak for everybody on the team and how they may or may not feel, but I love the fact that we're using layman's terms, rolling license scanning into dependency scanning, because I think that's how I have always conceived it. Software composition analysis, right, being the kind of, I guess, generally accepted term for dependency scanning. And I think it has been at times a little bit difficult to explain to our customer base that they are separate templates within GitLab. So I think that consolidation, if you will, is much appreciated, and it will fall in line with the thinking of much of the market and folks who are accustomed to perhaps other solutions they've used in the past. So a thumbs up on that one. And quick question about the license check drop of support for the license check user. Just because that, I would say there is, I can't give you a sense of what percentage of my customers depend heavily on it, but I would say this much: those who do depend on the license check user do use it as a very strong gating function, typically for legal teams. And if it's in the documentation, I haven't read it, so just tell me to read it. But I was wondering, what should the behavior that's expected look like once we do drop support? And the genesis of that question is, I want to make sure I can give a heads up to folks who do use it as a gating function if it's simply going to be bypassed. So I was curious, once we drop support, is there going to be, a banner that says, hey, we don't support this anymore, please read the documentation? Is this going to be bypassed? Is there more you can share on that front?
Sure. So there's the deprecation and then there's the removal, and those are two separate things. So we're deprecating it in 15.9, which is when we'll make our initial announcement. We are going to try to put in a banner. It's not going to make 15.9, but we are going to try to put in a notification banner in like 15.10. And then once we actually remove it in 16.0, it will just go away. So if they had it configured, it will be gone completely. It will no longer gate MRs. It won't be there in the product. There'll be no way to set it up. And if license check was previously enabled, it won't be there anymore. So, they have kind of this time window between 15.9 and 16.0 to move over to the new solution so that they don't lose that coverage.
Do we know at this time whether, let's say I am an individual user who's been assigned to do the license checks, would I receive a notification perhaps that says, hey, you are no longer, leveraging the license check feature? I guess
No, you would not receive like an email notification. No. So we'll be posting it like we do with all of our deprecations and removals. We'll be posting it on our deprecation page. So if they go there, they'll be able to read the details of it. And then, like I said, also in 15.10, we're working to add a banner at the top of any projects that are using license check, just to warn users of that change. So if they visit their project page, they're likely to see that banner. But we're not planning on like pushing out email notifications. That's not really something that we've done historically at GitLab. We don't even necessarily have all of that information because, it's hard for us to pull that because we've got a large base of self-managed users, and, going out and emailing them, it gets really difficult to email the correct folks and to do that across our entire customer base. So no, there will be no notification that way going out. However, if users do want push notifications of breaking changes, we've set up an RSS feed that they can subscribe to. And that's what will give them push notifications of all breaking changes. So if they come back and they say, well, all of this was pull, like I had to go to the documentation page, or I had to go to the project and I had to happen to see this banner, right? If they want notifications, it's an opt-in process and they can subscribe to our RSS feed to get those proactively, rather than it being more of a reactive process on their end.
Very cool.
I'll drop a link to that here in a
Awesome.
minute in the notes doc.
All right, you pre-answered my final question there. Yeah, that'd be much appreciated. Just since a couple of edge cases, right? Like maybe there's a dangling MR that's been left around for some time, or just folks are busy, right? And or some folks may have turned on the feature without the knowledge of their account team. So of course, there's some things that might be overlooked. So cool. That's all I had. I think all of these changes will be very much appreciated. I mean, they're really going to simplify some of the ways that we think about the product. That's my 20 questions for today.
That sounds good. Thank you.
All right, ready to stop? Flip over to the private side.